We spend 1/3 of our lives asleep. Every night that veil of oblivion falls as we enter the country of SOMNUS, an endangered territory, because insomnia is a global epidemic, as if our collective sleeplessness is signalling the need to dream some necessary collective dream.
The theme of the 2019 Fremantle Biennale was Undercurrent, and Theatre of the Sea was commissioned to activate PS, a contemporary art space in the West End of Fremantle. We took sleep, the lost third of our lives, as a defining undercurrent.
By day, the art space was a sleep sanctuary, a zone of quiet where sleepers occupied platforms as living sculptures. At night, we reversed the polarity and invited audiences to cross a border where they were washed with words spoken by entry poets, and then to enter the country of sleep as it woke up. Shed the time it took you to arrive. Shed the time before and after, the time you lost or found, saved or wasted. Shed the time you think you still have.
Theatre of the Sea have the capacity to bring both contemporary art installation, contemporary performance and theatre together in one kind of Gesamtkunstwerk, where the audience is both surprised, startled, but also deeply engaged. The audience member is brought right into the mix, right into the midst of the actual performance, and is even moved around the space and becomes an active participant in this new installation work.
In the research phase, I was reading what the sleep scientists were saying, and I realized that, like the poets, some of them wanted to be spies in the underworld of sleep. They wanted to interpret their data, their somnographs. Sleep scientist Matthew Walker would wake people up out of deep non-REM sleep and say, "Tell me what was happening." And it appeared that poetry had entered. People would say things like, "I was contemplating rain."
When the mind goes into sensory blackout, it lives in metaphors and images. It makes meaning out of distantly related concepts. Rather than being in a stupor, it's at times experiencing a higher order of harmony, which led me to propose in SOMNUS the existence of a night self, a wiser part of us that by day is wrapped under the spell of the senses, a night self that emerges as we fall asleep. It's as if every night when we cross the border into sleep, we shape a hidden biography, create another narrative. Perhaps the true story of our life is crafted in sleep, the true story being the one that keeps us most human. SOMNUS was an expedition across the threshold to sojourn with 4 sleepers, as their night selves led them into various scenarios, both harrowing and healing. But first, we had to unbind the night selves.
I hadn't expected to be so immersed in a piece of art. I hadn't expected it to be so multidimensional. I expected to be a passive audience member spectating something, and I suddenly came out having been immersed in this amazing journey, and music and poetry and visual and movement, and yeah, I was genuinely really moved.
Of sleep is something that Jennifer was talking a lot about in this year, and it's about how to perceive the sound. It's not about when we sleep, but what happens when we sleep. So there are so many questions to answer about this, and the sound to get to there was something for me, not just challenging, but very joyful challenging. Like how to achieve this sound, how to get to this sound, how to experience this sound in my head and then put it into the live. and also how to make an envelope of sound that would help the actors and all the people involved to get to the country of sleep, and also when the audience would come and be part of our installation, how they would perceive this and go with us to this country of sleep. So that was my main challenge, I would say.
Look, as CEO of an orchestra, I spend my life immersed in music, so to hear the score for this was particularly moving and exciting. A really unusual combination of instruments. You've got an oboe, a violin and an piano accordion. The folk Slovenian element that was interwoven through Eva's remarkable score was absolutely clear, and I loved that because it almost had a slightly pagan, earthy element, despite the fact that it was beautiful art music played at a world-class level.
So I think the way we worked, we imprinted a certain mood, a certain atmosphere on the whole of the cast, and we were able to hold that and move that and eventually engage the audience with it. So one of the most rewarding things about SOMNUS, to have gone over that threshold and challenged the audience with something that's really unusual. And also the challenge coming from an inner threshold, so there's nobody doing outrageous things on the stage, spilling blood or doing something the like, but it was an inner threshold, a threshold of subtleties.
The plume of doubt that obscured my face. My dreadlocks fell out.
So I think that was one of the strengths of SOMNUS, to go to a place that is seemingly subtle, ephemeral, and yet have such a powerful effect.
I've come to crown you with time, to give you my gaze, forwards, backwards.
I got to know the parts of the actors and the poetry, and so you take it into your dreams, yeah? And then in the morning you wake up and all of a sudden you go, yes, of course, it has to be like this. And it was lovely with the choir, whose role was, you know, growing and growing over time and became more specific, and it became clear to me that that was the engine of the whole piece. But it wasn't individual. Yeah, it was an underlying strength, so they had to be all looking alike, yeah, and more industrial because they were strong.
In the first half of 2019, director Horst Kornberger and I started to develop a process with 5 Slovenian artists who were to fly to Australia later in the year. So began the extraordinary collaboration that was SOMNUS. It was important that Australian audiences heard the Slovenian language, and we employed it at times without interpretation for the pure experience of its consonantal power.
Mistral, fin, ječanje od droga do droga.
Designer Carolin Linge joined us at Lake Sjenica, and I asked her to make a garment of fog, a garment to become an object of wonder in the installation. I'm interested in what poetry does to people, when somebody speaks a poem to you, face to face, eye to eye.
My heart has 4 chambers. In the last chamber, a bird comes and goes.
Where in life are we spoken to with such attention and intention? It's a powerful medium. It changes people.
It brings back a scrap of your laughter, a strand of your silence.
The performance is this beautiful, slow, evolving thing, and yet when I came out, I felt actually very uplifted, energized. cool. It was so exciting.